the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Learning How to Learn by Idries Shah. This audio has been made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Journeys to the East. Question: do you want us to go to the East or to join Sufi groups? Answer: I have said and written so much about Sufism and the Sufis that some people imagine that I am trying to influence them to join a cult or a religious grouping. It is, in fact, not possible for me to mount such a campaign, as I will now explain to you. Hearing and reading what I have had to say about the Sufis has caused hordes of the religious-minded to flow towards the often grotesque versions of Sufism in the East. It has also, with equal force, caused masses of the curious and greedy to flock around the guruist cults of the West. This leaves those who are uninformed, those who want to learn more of what Sufism is, and those who are unconcerned. This operation has been highly successful, but this part of it has had no higher function for the majority than any other instrument which sorts things, or people, out. The aim and the destination. A mere journey to the East generally has the effect of the jingle, "Two men looked out from prison bars, one saw mud, the other stars." What is the wayfarer like, quite apart from the road or the destination? Sheikh Sadi reminds us, "I fear that you will not reach Mecca, O traveller, for you are on the road to Turkestan." Take heart from the fact that this tendency to wander about looking for knowledge, and to set off for distant destinations, supposedly for knowledge, but in reality just to get moving, is a very human tendency. There are plenty of examples of it and of its consequences in my Tales of the Dervishes, and how this characteristic cropped up again and again in the lives of the classical Sufis and their disciples. So we have to assess who it is that is proposing to go to the East, when this person wants to go, and with whom, if anyone, and to where. More people go to the East and find nothing than ever realize any heart's desire, because they do not know how to structure their enterprise. Can you wait 150 years? Have you heard how Mullah Nasruddin heard that some parrots live to 150 years and bought a young one to check whether this would turn out to be true? Joining Sufi groups is unlikely to be useful to people who find groups that they have the option to join without being admitted after assessment as to whether they could usefully join. One would have to know about the Sufi group before giving an answer which implied that people are likely to encounter real Sufi groups among the derivative orders, or schools, or teachers, which have set themselves up publicly. Variety of statements. Whether studying in groups or travelling to the East, or whether otherwise engaged, I note that not many people seem to heed a wide enough variety of Sufi statements. One such, which would repay deeper study before searching, is the advice of the illuminate Mumshad Dinwari. You learn, he says, by association with a realized teacher, but you can gain nothing from such a person if you bring a sense of personal pride. The widespread compulsion to do things for which one is not fitted, and also to assume that one's choice of action is appropriate, is seen everywhere, in all epochs. The legless burglar. In the contemporary world, there is an excellent opportunity to see this working in the human behavior reported in the daily and weekly press. Take this almost random example. It shows behavior which underlies such things as unthinking group joining or journeys to the East. Are they the product of spiritual aspirations or of sheer non-thinking elevated into a virtue? A cat burglar, who climbed girders and houses to steal, and who carried out at least 41 thefts, was caught and brought to court. Of course he was caught, in spite of his great skill, because he happened to have no legs, having had them amputated years before. What a Sufi teacher looks like. Question: how should a teacher appear to the students according to the Sufis? The brick and the house. Answer: this question, like so many others which assume that they can be usefully answered in a few words, reminds me of a story about Mullah Nasruddin. Someone asked him what his house was like, basically. In reply, he brought this man a brick, saying, "It is just a collection of these." What the fool may do without realizing it is foolish, the wise man may have to do or say in order to show how unthinking the question is. How can you say what a teacher should look like? The most one can do is to make a few remarks about it. What is so perplexing to conditioned attitudes about the Sufis is that, unlike teachers of other kinds, they refuse to stick to one kind of appearance. As an example, if you go to see a Sufi divine, he may not look, talk, or act like a mystical master at all. This is because he says either, "You can teach only by the method indicated for each pupil, and you may have to teach by what seems to him unlikely," or else because he says, "There is a time and a place and certain company. According to these we will teach. When it is a time to be serious, we will be serious. When it is a time to work through what look like ordinary things, we have to do so." So important is this lesson that it can be said to go before all others, in the sense that failure to know this can prevent you from learning more, and can leave you attached to the externals of hypocrites. This includes, of course, unconscious hypocrites. If the Sufis are right in their claim that time affects behavior, and that personal appearance should change, and even temperament, then obviously all the people who cultivate a reverend appearance, and all those who acquire it, mistaking this for spirituality, are wrong. It is this unspoken contradiction which makes it almost impossible for people who want continuity and easily identifiable teaching figures to accept the change in circumstances and attitudes which the Sufi way demands. These people, of course, will not have thought it out like this. All they know is that a holy man must seem holy to me, or if he always behaves in the same manner, or always exhorts me to the same things, I believe that he may be right. The other problem is that the observer is confusing, as he is bound to confuse without having understood, continuity and consistency with reliability or truth. Because butter always tastes the same when it looks the same, he expects a similar reliability in his spiritual teacher. He is, of course, self-deceived in this assumption. The genesis of the attitude adopted by the people of externals is that their inward drive is for finding tidiness, order. This is not a spiritual activity. It is perhaps rather a therapeutic one. Order is essential for disordered people. Looking for it as a major factor in esoteric directions is the mistake. In trying to make what, for them, is order out of what they imagine to be the disorder of Sufi tradition, they have to oversimplify. They ignore parts of the teaching and succeed only in creating an imitation of Sufism. Because so many people desire order so strongly, you will find more imitations than reality. One cannot blame anyone for this, but pointing out facts can help. What a teacher should be. Ibn Arabi's dictum on this matter has not been bettered. People think that a teacher should display miracles and manifest illumination. but the requirement in a teacher is that he should possess all that the disciple needs. Beyond appearances. In order to possess what a disciple needs, the teacher must be one who has gone beyond appearances and has realized his innermost self, after transcending the barriers imposed by attachment to secondary factors. He really exists and is aware of this existence. As Ibn Arabi says, absolute existence is the source of all existence. Hallaj put it in this way, indicating the peculiarity of the realized individual. I am the real, for I have not ceased to be real, through the real. Sufi teachers who have reached stages where strange things happen in their vicinity, generally called miracles and wonders, due to actions other than any attempt to impress, have to try to compensate for this. Otherwise, people are attracted to them or to the Sufis in general because of a craving for wonders. The Onion Shop. One example of this is when the great woman Sufi Rabia had no vegetables in the house and mentioned it. Suddenly a string of onions fell from the sky, it seemed, and people cried out that this was a proof of divine blessing. Conversions through miracles, Rabia realized, are only emotional happenings and have no essential spiritual reality. So she said, in a famous phrase, "A miracle, you say? What, does my lord therefore keep an onion shop?" Books and beyond books. Question: what is the compatibility, if any, of the Sufi book and the Sufi teaching beyond books? Answer: many people say that they cannot learn from books. Instrumental function. Of course they cannot, because they have first to learn that, correctly guided, they can learn from books, or from grasshoppers, or from anything. A book, for the Sufis, is an instrument as much as it is something to give information. Information and action are both necessary. The key is the teacher. If he says, "Read this book," then you should read it. If your answer is, "I cannot learn from books," then you are in fact refusing his teaching. If you refuse teaching, do not be surprised if you do not learn anything. You may be one of those whose problem is that you do not want to learn, and your saying, "I want to learn," is a protection against ever learning, an incantation, in fact. No real teacher will mistake a man or woman who merely says, "I want to learn," for one who undoubtedly wants to learn. That is why so many people have to go through stages which will show them their condition, while they claimed that they wanted to learn and could not find the materials, was an unsuitable basis for learning. Reality and potentiality. Man has to come to understand how to see himself as he really is, so that he can achieve something in the area which he calls what he might be. Again, it is the teacher who knows what is indicated, whether his student has to develop through linear or other modes. As Khaja Khan says, traditionally, direct teaching beyond books, the mystery of unification, was taught to the spiritual elite, while the linear holy law, the Islamic Sharia, was given to the ordinary people. In this way, the limited could rise via discipline, the Sharia, and the elite were able to descend to the law by means of the truth of immediate perception. According to the Sufis, there is only one essence, reality, haqq, or truth. Derived from this is appearance, form, referred to by Ibn al-Arabi in his Fusus al-Hakim and others as khalq, that which is created, secondary. To mistake the secondary for the primary is usual, and humanity has to learn how to avoid this. But living in a secondary realm, the world, humanity must learn the value and limitations of the secondary, of phenomena. The limitations include the fact that such derivatives cannot help one beyond a certain stage with anything, The value is the occasions and circumstances in which such things can be of help, and the kind of use they can be. Value of the relative. The relative is the channel to the absolute. Al-Majazu Kantarat al-Hakika encapsulates this statement. The Sufi's experience informs him in relation to knowing how to deal with the secondary factors, and hence enables him to teach. The Sufi teaching through books, or through the use of scholastic methods applied to indicate their absurdity or limitations, was demonstrated one day by Shaqiq of Balkh, when Harun al-Rashid visited him seeking wisdom. The value of a kingdom. The Caliph, in all his magnificence, was in need of a lesson in the relative nature of power and possessions. "Ask a favor of me," he said. Shaqiq asked him whether he would give one half of his realm to someone who would give him a drink of water if he were dying of thirst in a desert. Harun said that he would. And, continued the Sufi, would he give the other half to someone who enabled him to pass that water if he had become unable to do so? Harun said that he would. Now Shaqiq asked the Caliph to reflect why he valued his kingdom so highly when it was something which could be given away in return for a drink of water, which itself does not stay with one. People assume, like the Caliph, that they have something of value and that by giving some of it away they can gain something of even greater value. They tend, too, to offer not what they have to get rid of, but something which they can give because they want to. Therein lies the genesis of trade, and a desirable thing it is, too, if confined to trade. Therein, too, lies the desire to prescribe one's own studies, one's own path. "Ask a favor of me," as the Caliph put it. But as the Sufis never tire of saying, the path has its own requirements, and the things which people want to do are likely to be those which will help them to continue in the way in which they are already set, rather than in a direction which will break through their limitations. Because Sufi affairs do not seem to resemble a kind of organization of studies familiar to most people, they imagine that they have to be carried out in a completely incoherent manner. It is worth listening to what Aftabuddin Ahmad has to say about this in his introduction to a version of Gilani's Futu al-Ghaib. Sufism as a science. The word mysticism, employed in English for Sufism, has an elusive atmosphere about it, whereas tasawwuf, Sufism, is a regular science with its set laws and a full scheme in detail. It is based on palpable experiences which can be reproduced, like in any other science, under set circumstances. Every pilgrim has to pass through the same stages in his spiritual journey, and these stages are readily recognizable by their detailed descriptions given unanimously by all masters. The landmarks and pitfalls are described in equally exhaustive particulars. Just as in any other course of study, there are methods in it to test the progress of the disciple and his merit. As in any other branch of knowledge, there are geniuses in this branch of study who create a stir in the world. Garbled message. Books and other methods of mass communication are used selectively by Sufi teachers, and there are cases where the message is garbled, so that they do not use certain versions of them at all. Some translations, for instance, contain ludicrous errors, even when made by experts. This sort of garbling can happen with anything, and only a human guide can put things to right. The news story. The British Broadcasting Corporation, within hours of the death of King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, put out a recording of a highly emotional account of the assassination taken from the Saudi network. This, you would imagine, must be something on which one could rely. But there was only one problem about the BBC's version. It was in fact the final minute of the Czech-language commentary on the Ali Wepner fight in Cleveland, Ohio, Reading some Sufi materials, they sound the same. This podcast is copyright 2018, the Idries Shah Foundation.